Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neera Tandon, and I serve as the CEO for the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to this incredibly important and very timely conversation. Right at this very moment, Republicans are scrambling to ram a disgraceful tax plan through Congress, one that would further rig our economy in favor of the most powerful and the super rich. Both the House and Senate tax bills would offer huge handouts to big corporations, raise taxes for millions of working families, and add hundreds of billions of dollars to our deficit each year, giving Republicans in the future an excuse to slash basic services such as Medicare and Medicaid. So it's crystal clear that America's small business owners simply cannot afford for these Republican bills to pass. Our small businesses deserve a fair shake. They deserve actions that would help level the playing field, not a plan that would skew it further to the advantage of big corporations. And if we want our small businesses to succeed, which have been the engine of growth for our economy, we need to make larger scale investments in the neighborhoods and the people they serve. Investments that will strengthen our local economies and help our families and businesses to thrive. That's why CAP Action is so proud to host this event with our partners at the Main Street Alliance Action Fund. I want to recognize the four outstanding entrepreneurs who are joining us this afternoon: David Boris, Rashonda Young, Deborah Field, and Bev Armstrong, who are in the front row. They'll be joining us soon after the Senator's remarks. We're so thankful that they've traveled here from all over the country to share how these Republican tax plans hurt their companies and their communities. And now I have the honor to introduce our other special guest for today, one of our nation's greatest progressive champions and a person who fights for working families literally every moment of every day, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Yes. Senator Warren understands that our country needs a bold new agenda which fundamentally rethinks how our economy and our democracy operate. It's why she's worked all her life to put the interests of America's consumers, small business owners, and workers before those of the 1%. And it's why she fought tirelessly to demand greater accountability from the richest and most powerful people in our country, from bankers to Wall Street to lobbyists on K Street and politicians on Capitol Hill. We're so grateful for her leadership and her continued support for these causes and so many more. So please help me welcome Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. So it is so good to be here today. I am delighted to see all of you, and thank you for the very generous introduction. It's always good to be here at CAP, and it is especially good to be here with business people, people who run their own businesses. You know, Neera was good to give everyone's name, but the more fun part is what everyone is out there building. So we have Rashonda Young here from Iowa, Popcorn Heaven. I love it. I love it. David Boris from Illinois, who owns Hell's Kitchen Catering. You got to love that name, right? Deborah Field from Oregon, who owns Paper Jam Press, and Bev Armstrong from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who owns Brazo Fuerte Artisanal Beer. Okay, so the real reason I wanted to be here today was for free samples. I'm taking home beautiful stationery, that's the idea, great food, right? Popcorn, and most of all, beer to come do this. But I really am, I'm delighted to be here today. You know, what I love about talking to small business owners is that small business owners actually look like America. You can see that today. A report by the Small Business Administration showed that women owned or co-owned about half of all small businesses in America, and about 30% of small businesses are minority owned. Nearly 10% of all small businesses are owned by a veteran. You know, if the corporate boardrooms and the corner offices looked like small businesses, we'd have a very different America today. So I'm all for this. So anyway, I'm here today to talk about America's small businesses and the Republican tax plan. Republicans are running around town saying that their tax plan is great for the economy. So my view on this is it cannot be great for the economy unless it's great for small businesses. There are 29.6 million small businesses in the United States. They employ 58 million workers. Since 1993, small businesses have created more than 60% of all new jobs in America. Small businesses grow our economy. And I just want to say personally on this one, I have seen the grit and determination that it takes to run a small business. When I was 13, I started waiting tables at my Aunt Alice's restaurant. Aunt Alice had been widowed in her early 50s, and she hadn't worked outside the home before Uncle Claude died. But when he died, she pulled up her socks and she did what she knew how to do, and that was cook. And her place didn't make a lot of money, but she lived in the back of the restaurant and she got by. And I spent summers and holidays working for her and living in the back myself with her. And I saw firsthand the kind of commitment and the kind of energy it takes to launch a small business and to keep it going. 6 days a week from early in the morning until late in the evening. Aunt Alice did everything from argue with the produce delivery guy to fill in for the dishwasher who failed to show up. And on the 7th day, we scrubbed floors on our hands and knees and got ready to start it all over for the next week. It was that same kind of special spark that drove my brother David, that when he got out of the military, started his own small business. When that one didn't work out, started another one, and when that one didn't work out, started another. He could not imagine an America where he wasn't out there living by his wits every single day. These days, though, it is really hard for small businesses to compete because they are not playing on a level playing field. The average small business pays about the same tax rate as the average American family, about 17.5%. But here's the trick. Those small businesses have to compete with big guys who hire tax wizards to use tricks and loopholes to make their tax bills disappear. In fact, we have 4 small business owners here, and they're going to be up here in just a minute, but I'm going to start right now. I've got all 4 of them here. I thought you were going to be sitting behind me here. And I want to do an experiment with my 4 small business owners. So, how many of you tried to avoid paying taxes by executing a tax inversion and relocating your corporate headquarters to Bermuda? I'm seeing no hands go up. Ireland? The Cayman Islands? Come on. All right. Okay. 0. And how many of you small business owners executed a reverse hybrid mismatch to cut down on your tax liability? Dang. Okay. Just sitting there on your hands. Okay. So one more question. How many of you engage in earnings stripping by having your foreign subsidiary make a loan to your American company so that you can deduct interest payments to yourself from your American tax bill? It is, and still will be. Okay, answer 0. And that's really the point here. Now, I've got one more. Raise your hand if you feel like you don't have a fair shot to compete against big corporations who can do all those things with their tax bills. And that's really the point here. You know, getting rid of the loopholes in the tax code and making it a fair fight, that's something I could stand behind. But the Republican tax plan doesn't do that, doesn't even come close. The loopholes for giant corporations are preserved in the tax code that the Republicans are putting forward. And even the so-called small business tax breaks were really just giveaways for huge companies in disguise. Republicans have a handful of proposals out there for what they're calling the small business tax cuts. But it's clear their hearts are really in it for the big businesses. The proposals all focus on changing the tax rates for pass-through businesses, which includes a lot of small businesses, but also some giant companies like oil pipelines, Amway, owned in part by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, and yes, the Trump administration. So take the bill that's before the Senate right now. All pass-through owners get to deduct a set percentage of their business income from their tax bill. Now, that means if you own a gigantic oil pipeline with a lot of income, you get to shield a giant lump of money from being taxed. But if you run a small startup that's just breaking even, it was only the tiniest little tax change. In fact, it's worse than that. The Republicans are creating a maze of rules that small business owners will have to navigate. And that means hiring lawyers, hiring accountants, spending long hours trying to figure out what is taxed or what's taxed at what rate. Remember when Republicans said that their goal was to simplify the tax code? Yeah. The small business tax rules are about as simple as the manual for an IKEA dresser. Complete with 7 drawers. The bill moving through the House is even more upside down. And I just want to pick one example from it. If you are a wealthy, passive investor in a business, you get a better tax rate than if you're the one actually running the business, busting your tail like my Aunt Alice or the small business people who are here with us today. This isn't just a tax cut for rich people. It's a tax cut for rich people who spend all day at the luxury spa while other people work. And what about the individual tax rates that entrepreneurs pay? Well, here too, the Republicans have woven a web of hikes and cuts and loopholes that will make accountants' mouths water. It is confusing. It is complicated. Some of the middle class may get a modest tax break, but many won't. The story, however, is a little different in the clubhouse at Mar-a-Lago, where the tax giveaways are big and juicy. I wonder how that happened. If the Republicans in Congress think that this plan helps small business, then frankly, they just don't know anything about small businesses. This plan does nothing to level the playing field, and it does nothing to face the real problems that small businesses face. In fact, it makes their challenges a whole lot harder. The Republican plan will explode the national debt, and we all know what's next. Republicans will say, boy, our national debt is too high. We sure need to take a sledgehammer to Medicaid and to Medicare and to Social Security and to investments in infrastructure and housing. In fact, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and the top economic advisor, Gary Cohn, have all said as much already. The Republican budget they just passed already assumes trillions of dollars in cuts to exactly those programs. If Republicans can push through those cuts, it will be devastating to small businesses. For small businesses to be resilient and sustainable, they need customers with money in their pockets. Roads and bridges are important for getting goods to market. Good schools and good health care are important for making sure that employees are prepared to do their jobs and that they're healthy, productive workers. The health of small businesses depends on the vibrancy of their communities and the well-being of their workers. And by that measure, the Republican tax plan is a disaster. The Republican plan showers $1.5 trillion on giant corporations. Just imagine for a minute what we could do with that money instead. We could pour it into infrastructure investments, creating millions of good-paying new jobs immediately and making the entire economy more competitive worldwide. Or we could pay down every penny of student loan debt in this country. Or we could invest in pre-kindergarten for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and childcare for younger children that would make it easier for mamas and daddies to work and help prepare the next generation of workers. All of those things, any of those things, would boost our small businesses more than the GOP tax giveaway. The road to real tax reform starts by defeating this GOP bill. But I'll tell you this, it is not going to be easy. The halls of Capitol Hill are swarming with lobbyists who represent big corporations, and they are hell-bent on slamming this tax plan through Congress. The only way we can beat this thing, move on to actually leveling the playing field for small businesses and invest in our communities, is with your help. So I'm here. I am ready to fight. I stand with small businesses. Together, we can beat this tax plan and we can build an economy that works for small businesses and for hardworking families all across this country. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you. Want to come up here?
Yep. Thank you so much, Senator Warren. That was really terrific. And I'm more excited. We're going to continue this conversation with our small business owners. So let me briefly introduce them, but let me run through. So first of all, my name is Seth Hanlon. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for American Progress, and I focus on tax issues. Let me introduce our panelists again. So Rashonda Young is the owner of Popcorn Heaven. It's a gourmet popcorn retailer with locations throughout Iowa. She's been in business since 2014 and has expanded into 5 stores that employ 22 people and is currently in the process of expanding into different states and markets. David Barras is the owner of Hell's Kitchen Catering. It's a gourmet catering company in Chicago. He and his wife Carrie started Hell's Kitchen in 1985 in a 900 square foot retail storefront, and they've since grown the business to employ dozens of people in the Chicagoland area. Deborah Field is the co-owner and president of Paper Jam Press. It's a printing and design company with 5 employees in Portland, Oregon. She's been an entrepreneur for 25 years. Prior to starting Paper Jam, she worked for 15 years as a financial and tax accountant for a large multinational corporation, as well as medium and small companies. So she knows tax and she knows business. Bev Armstrong founded Brazo Fuerte Artisanal Beer. She is a Harvard JD and MBA, and as I understand, a former student of Senator Warren at some point.
Yes.
Who spent over a decade in the biotech industry in finance, operations, and law. And now 2 years ago, she took a radical turn in her career to pursue her longstanding passion, brewing craft beer and working to build a world-class beer company with a culture that values community, the environment, and sustainable business practices. So I can't think of a better panel from around the country of small business owners, and let's start this conversation.
So this sounds great. I am delighted that you are all here. Thank you for being here. So what I want to start with is the basic question about what is it you need for your businesses to be successful and for you to grow jobs. Can you just say a word about that? What do you?
Fairness, tax fairness.
Say more.
Making sure that we're all paying our fair share of taxes, that the burden isn't on small business owners. Also, things like closing the corporate tax loopholes, bringing all the money that's offshore and back into our country. These are the things that really help us level the playing field.
And why do those things help?
I'd say
Go ahead, Bev.
that along with the same lines, things that reduce the income inequality in the country help to broaden my consumer base. Right? I don't want to concentrate wealth. I want to broaden wealth so that more people can be appealed by
So you just want more people with a little money in their pockets,
That
right?
would be good.
Because they're more likely to buy your beer, they're more likely to come in and buy invitations and stationery and the things you sell. Good. What else?
Exactly.
Please.
So we need customers.
You need customers.
Customers. We need a thriving middle class that can afford to buy, a $15 bag of popcorn.
Yep.
That's a wages conversation, and that's an investment in infrastructure conversation, right?
Say more.
So one of the greatest things that happened in this country to fuel one of the big economic booms post-World War II, right? The 60s economy is fueled by a lot of things, including the 90%, 70% cut in the top marginal rate, but it was also fueled by a Republican president who built the interstate highway system, right? And it was built by workers. The government dollars funded private companies that built the ability for companies to move their product from Chicago to Los Angeles in a day's less time. That's all big government conversations that we're all in this thing together. To have the federal minimum wage sit where it sits and to leave it up to states and then local communities to fight over little territorial problems about whose wages land where, we all wind up suffering, right? The jobs that were lost in the Great Recession, the jobs themselves are back, but they're back paying 60% of the wages that they paid. So my neighbor business's middle level employee is my business's customer.
Yeah.
And when he's making 30% less, he can't spend that money with me because it's not there anymore.
All right, so the thing you all need most, as you say, it's customers. And we produce those customers. Go ahead, Bev.
By the same token, investment in infrastructure, which helps create jobs, but that also helps me get my product around, get from point A to point B, as well as investment in renewable energy sources, because broadening the mix of energy sources will help to lower the costs, my operating costs.
Good.
In general.
Good. So let me ask a question around this then. So I understand your point about being in this together. Big corporations have a lot of loopholes, and we've seen the consequences of some of those loopholes. This tax plan pretty much lets them keep them all. So I really wasn't kidding about the tax havens and so on. It says, have at it, right? Keep it up. Way to go. Why do you care? I get that you don't get to use them, but why do you care that giant corporations still have lots of tax loopholes? Anybody?
Well, first, it takes money away from the American economy.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
The other thing,
And talk about why it takes money away from the American economy.
well, we have less tax dollars that are coming in.
So we don't have the tax dollars. Now we'll go back to Bev's point. And if you don't have the tax dollars, how are you doing on that highway thing? Right. You can't spend it on the infrastructure. You can't upgrade the infrastructure. You let it fall apart. So that's part of it. We're just not getting the revenues from these guys.
Yeah, which affects infrastructure, affects our education system.
Yep. Yep. Please.
And it also allows the big guys to keep more money in their pockets, which allows them to have a lot more money to be competitive and to advertise, and also to pay off our lobbyists to fight for their causes.
That's right. Keep that lobbying
Yeah.
industry going. Great,
Yes.
great. Yep, that's another consequence. Anything more anybody wants to add about what this means?
Yeah, I think particularly with the craft beer industry, with the beer industry in general, there's a huge
You see
divide
this in your
between-
industry, don't you?
every day. And the big companies are already sort of beating us by outspending us.
Right.
You know, we're focused on higher quality products and getting products that consumers want. They're just outspending us, and this will just help them do that even more.
Right. You know, one of the parts that drives me crazy about the tax bill that the Republicans have proposed is they have two different tax rates. One if you earn your money here in America, and another one if you earn your money anywhere outside America. And guess which one's lower?
Of course.
If you invest overseas. And the whole notion that any country would say, we want to move to a tax system where, in effect, the American taxpayers, America's small businesses, are going to subsidize the big corporations for moving more jobs overseas, for investing more overseas, for growing new businesses overseas instead of growing them here at home. So you go back to the point about what you want most of all as customers. Well, I don't know how many people you're serving in your popcorn business who are actually somewhere in Europe or somewhere in Asia or somewhere in South America, right? But that's where they're creating more workers. That's what this tax plan would try to do. So let me see if I can do this another way. The tax plan, we'll talk about two or three of the provisions, would severely limit state and local deductions, right? And really shrink up on that. What would be the impact of that for your businesses?
Well, it just draws more money out, right? So we're taking money out of the pockets of our consumers, right? Yep. Our consumers are people that earn $40,000 a year to maybe $150,000 to $200,000 a year. Everything that we do that takes dollars out of those pockets takes dollars out of our business coffers. While we leave completely untouched the dollars that flow into people's pockets who are earning $500,000 or $1 million a year. Look, I'm not against people. I've had AGIs of over $500,000 a year over the years at different times, right? We have a very successful company. I don't begrudge people the opportunity to make as much money as they can make in a capitalist economy. I do begrudge them the dodging their responsibilities to the greater society that put that money in their pockets.
Yeah,
and we do that with the tax code, this tax.
Jump in, Matt.
Talked about the state and local tax deduction. So I just want to be clear. Under this bill, they take it away for individuals and for pass-through business owners, like all the small businesses in the country. Corporations will still be able to deduct their state and local taxes
Yeah.
on their profits.
So just one more way to tilt the playing field again on this one. Did you want to say more? I wanted to make sure that I hadn't left you out of this, Deborah, on the consequences of the state and local taxes.
No, I think everybody addressed my concerns.
So I want to ask another question about this. It's always tough to run a small business. They have high failure rates. We all know this. It takes a certain optimism and willingness to make a full commitment, right, all the way in to run a small business. And one of the things I worry about is whether or not small businesses get a chance to build up a little cushion, whether or not consumers get a chance to build up a little cushion. We watched during the crisis in 2008 and the fallout from that, about 170,000 small businesses were shut down. And what I worry about under this tax plan in part is that big businesses can continue to build up reserves. I mean, they have incredible reserves right now and incredible access to lenders when they need it, incredible access to markets when they need more investment, if they need capital to see them through a rough patch. Talk to me a little bit about small businesses and how thin the margins are and how this actually, tax bills that tilt the playing field, how much that affects a small business. Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I might approach it from a little different angle.
Please do.
Cash flow is always an issue for small businesses. And I live by a principle of, we all have to make profit to keep running.
I'm in favor.
However, I also live by a principle that purpose, people, planet, and prosperity. So I don't judge all of my successes by that bottom line, okay? Having said that, even more important for us is access to capital. So rather than we having cash sitting there, that we have the ability to go out there in the financial world and borrow, and we don't. It's very challenging to get money in our existing financial situation.
Very challenging for small
businesses to get money. And so that's, I think, the bigger issue for most of us. I think we'd all agree here.
And credit card companies in Wall Street, the greed and avarice there is just happy to fill the breach, right? Happy to call you up and say, listen, I can give you up to $60,000 for the next 18 months, interest-free. You'll pay me 3% up front, but they know what the rate of people that are actually going to pay it all back in 18 months is somewhere in the single digits. Right. And then the real interest rates kick in, and it's all there because there aren't valid ways for us to be able to go get money at rates that we should be able to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to, so I've got 5 store owners with Popcorn Heaven, and there's a couple of them that, we work together, well, we all work together closely, but a couple of them, we're just trying to figure out how can they stock up for Christmas. One of the store owners currently has a loan of about $30,000. She does not own a home, and so she doesn't really have anything to leverage. And so she was just trying to get an additional $20,000, so a maximum of $50,000 for her small business that's been running for 2 years, so she could stock up for Christmas and have a little bit of a cushion. And she's been working on that since September with no success. So the access to capital is huge. A $50,000 loan, that's nothing.
I know you have to, sorry, I was going to say, I know you have to get back to the Senate pretty soon, so.
Yikes, I do, in just a minute.
Just
Can I
a minute.
do
Do you
one
wanna
more
ask one more
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have
and then
one
we're
more.
going to continue this
Okay,
conversation.
you all will continue this
after Senator Warren
conversation.
leaves,
I have to get back, but I mentioned when I was talking about this about complexity, because the Republicans have been talking about let's simplify the tax code, right? And this is what worries me, is every time you make it more complex for small businesses, it just means your cost of doing business, figuring out your taxes relative to what it takes to figure out taxes for guys who, let's face it, the big corporations, they hire a lot more people, but of course they're doing that against a much, much larger revenue base. So I was taking a look at one of the key sections that will affect small businesses. You ready? Okay, this is just a small part of what is supposed to be the plain English summary of the actual provision. This is not the actual provision. This is the ABC version of the actual provision, the horsey and ducky version, as I like to think of it. Okay. Under the provision, owners or shareholders may elect to apply a formula based on the facts and circumstances of their business to determine a capital percentage of greater than 30%. That formula would measure the capital percentage based on the rate of return, the federal short-term rate plus 7%, multiplied by the capital investments of the business. And owners or shareholders' capital percentage would be limited if actual wages or income treated as received in exchange for services from the pass-through entity, e.g., a guaranteed payment, exceeds the taxpayer's otherwise applicable capital percentage. The determination of whether a capital is active or passive with respect to a particular business activity would rely on current law material participation and activity rules within the regulations governing the limitation on passive activity losses under Code Section 469. So, everyone got that? Everybody ready? Go ahead.
So that is obviously not written to protect small business owners. The active entrepreneur, that's not what that's written for. That is written so that wealthy individuals, passive investors, can take advantage of riding on the backs of real entrepreneurs so that they can wind up with lower taxes. Does nothing to help us.
You said it perfectly. Anybody else want to add to that? Because that's what this tax plan is about overall. It's to say, hey, let's put some small businesses out in front, claim we're going to help them, and just do more to help the big guys.
You know what we call that? What we've called that at Main Street Alliance for a long, long time. We called it this when we had the fight over providing universal health care. We call it identity theft. Right? Don't steal our identity. Stop putting big business interest in calling it small business interest, because they're two different things.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. All right. I'm going to run off and do my job.
Thank
all
you.
right. Thank you.
Nice.
Take care.
Thanks so much. All right, we're going to continue this conversation. I mean, maybe we should drill down further on this sort of pass-through rate. I mean, so to be clear, this is the provision that they're calling the small business tax cut. And what it is a special deduction just on some kinds of income, but not others. And I think, as you were emphasizing, it's the very intent of it is to allow passive investors in pass-through entities to claim it, but the people, the active businesses. Senator Warren said something about material participation was part of the.
Right.
You know, they're the ones that the rules are trying to prevent from claiming this new loophole. Do you want to talk further about how that would operate in the context of your business?
I'd be happy to do that. As you know, I was a tax accountant, and one of the first things I wanted to do was crunch some numbers, right? So I took my existing 2016 income numbers, which 2017 are going to be very similar, and I based it on the new proposed tax proposal, and guess what? Did I save any tax dollars? It's supposed to be giving me tax relief, right? No. I ended up paying $700 more. Now, that's not a lot, but it's not tax relief. So I'm a sub-S, pass-through income person, and that's my story.
How are you going to figure that out? I mean, do you have you have a tax accountant?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a tax accountant. I don't do my own.
Right.
But that it's going to, I'll be charged a lot more for complicated tax changes. So that's how it'll affect me.
And really, I think that's part of the point, right? What we want, I think, in the American economy, right, is we want entrepreneurs doing what you're doing, doing what you're doing, doing what Rashonda's doing. And that is pouring all of our creative energies. I mean, everybody's got limited bandwidth, right? I mean, you can only be awake 16 or 22 hours a day, and you got to carve out time for your family and time for your faith. And then what you have left to focus on your business should be all your creative energies in developing goods and services to give into a community. The community rewards you back with profit, and you can reinvest in the community. That's the model, right, that built the great American economic engine. When you have to carve out that kind of time to start thinking about, well, really, I don't really need to worry about bringing innovative ideas to market. What I need to worry about is how do I cheat my community, cheat my state, and cheat my country out of my fair share. That's a completely broken system.
Anybody else want to add to that? So I wanted to, also talk about, we talk about sort of like leveling the playing field, whether there's a level playing field between large businesses and large corporations and small businesses. And I was just hoping you could talk in a little more kind of, with a little more context about, how the unlevel playing field exactly, affects your business and your industry.
Sure. So, one of the biggest things is the ability to advertise. And they touched on this already, but when you have a budget of about $800 to $1,000 a month for advertising, the big corporations, they're spending that in a day.
Because you're competing against large, food manufacturers,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I think the health insurance marketplace is one of the most disturbing on-level playing fields. We took a little step.
Oh, sorry.
toward
Can you
making-
speak? I think somebody's saying. Can you just talk a
Sure.
little louder? Yeah.
We took a little bit of a step toward leveling that playing field a bit 8 years ago, but it's still remarkably on level for small businesses. The premiums that we pay were not large enough to be able to take advantage of partial self-insurance the way large corporations are. The problems with the whole country, all 50 states, buying into the idea of what we were doing, it sort of crippled it in different areas, and that's a place that if Congress wants to really put their nose into what's going to help small businesses over the long term, we could take a great step to doing real work on healthcare, right? And making it much more universal and making it much simpler than leaving small business to the greed and avarice of insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies.
In addition, there's so many things. Did you want to say something? Yeah. Go ahead.
I touched on the impact of the disparity earlier, especially in my industry, where the big businesses already have a
You hear?
huge.
Yeah. Sorry.
The big businesses in my industry already have a huge advantage in terms of raising.
Which is like Anheuser-Busch. So yeah, global company. Yeah. Yes.
Be clear in terms of access to capital, raising money, the ability to outspend small craft brewers who are trying to make product and are focusing on making great beer. These guys have tons of money to spend in ways that we can't. That directly, it's a retail consumer business and their ability to reach people based upon their marketing budget.
So I want to ask. We want to get to audience questions in about just another couple minutes. We'll have about 15 minutes for that. But I just want to ask, instead of focusing on sort of marginal tax rates for corporations or for businesses, what should Congress be doing? What would your sort of number one or top three things that Congress should be doing to help your business?
Yeah, I could add to that. One of the things that we need to do is raise our minimum wage across the board. We need to give more people more money, and that will bring more customers to small business owners. Bottom line. We also need to, like I mentioned earlier, we need to close the tax loopholes and the offshore tax havens. That's another really big item. That's what should be in this proposal. Those two things are the top of my list.
Go.
My top two would be certainly investment in education, investment in that form of infrastructure, because we've got a hard time finding employees, finding people who are qualified to fill positions that we have. There's a lot of engineering and math and such in Vermeer, surprisingly, but it's hard to find people who have the skills out of the box. And then also, I can't emphasize enough investment in renewable energy, clean energy. Our process is a very energy-intensive process, and we're trying to build something that will help our communities and that will help the future of our country and our economy. Clean energy is needed to do that, and that also lowers our costs.
Strengthen the EPA, not dismantle it. If what happened in Flint, Michigan had happened in Northbrook, Illinois, my company would be out of business. I can't make my product without safe, clean drinking water, right?
So let me just ask you. So Republicans will say that regulation and the point to federal agencies are killing, crushing small businesses with paperwork. Is that the case? I mean, what would you say to that?
Not the case, and I would ask them this question, again, pertaining to my industry. Find me a Republican congressperson that says we should go back to the regulatory environment that existed the day before Upton Sinclair published The Jungle. Is that the society that we want to live in? We cry all the time about, oh, these Chinese toys come in and they have lead in them. Well, they have lead in them because they don't have the regulatory environment that we have here. So that would be my answer to regulation. There are possibly, you'll find me some onerous regulations. When you find them, I'll discuss them with you. But for the most part, a regulated society is a society that understands the proper role of business in its society. Proper role of business is to go out and maximize profit and reward shareholders. But to pretend that they are also supposed to wear a separate hat with an altruistic nature is absurd. So who's going to stand in the breach? Who stands to say, wait a minute, you've gone too far? That's government. That's the people represented by their elected representatives to say, wait, we need a healthy tension all the time between the commons and the potential for greed in the business environment. It can work. It worked well for a while. Not working now.
Yeah, I was going to say regulations. I totally agree with David. I mean, there are things within the food industry. Okay, you may bellyache that you're going to have to have the health department come in, but I don't want to go to a restaurant where the health department is not regulating them.
Right. You can't have your butter and your bleach on the same shelf.
Exactly.
That's a good thing.
Right. It is a good thing.
And the health department, of course, is local. I mean, it's local, right? It's not federal
It is
regulations
local.
in the first place anyway,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
Got it. Should we go to audience questions at this point? Okay, great. Yeah, we'll take some questions from the audience. I definitely see some hands up. Do we want to start here? The orange shirt? Yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm Mitzi Wertheim with the Naval Postgraduate School. I bought a book yesterday called A Cartoon Guide to a Political World Gone Mad and Mean by Robert Reich. Listening to what you've talked about, I'm conscious of how complicated it is, and I really would like to see it done visually. And the question is, how do we get stories created so non-experts can understand them, and the non-experts turn out to be voters? And you want them to understand this. I have my own view, and I'm sorry the senator left, is that all academics who write an article have to also do a version for non-experts. And when they're complicated, making them visual is much easier. And I would suggest that you all think about it, share this ideas, and see how you could push this idea forward. Because we have, when 2/3 of our voters, according to the Washington Post, don't understand we have 3 branches of government, we're in trouble.
I think it's a great question. I mean, honestly, I think that's sort of a question directed at, we're the policy professionals here in Washington, and I think, we try to do everything we can that's our job, is to explain very complex policy areas. Taxes, like, hopelessly complex. You have to try to drill it down, and that's our job. I mean, I think the thing that we try to do, that we're trying to do, is just let people, make sure we're hearing from real people, and not just the. Yeah, exactly. That we're not at the level of that, statutory language that Senator Warren read, right? We're actually hearing from real people. So, I mean, I think that it's critically important that's why we had this event today, to hear from small business owners. I think it's critically important that people, go to town halls and make sure that, they tell their stories about how the tax plan affects them. We're having an event on Capitol Hill today. Some of our allies are having an event, with people that benefit from things like the medical expense deduction and the student loan interest deduction that are taken away by this Republican tax bill. Just telling their stories, and it's not complicated. It's like, I get hurt by this bill, So that's the one way we're trying to communicate, issues that I hear you are extremely complicated. Does anybody else want to weigh in while we hear the question? Should we take another one? Do you want back there, Billy?
Hi, my name is Skip Halpern. I'm with the chapter of Indivisible out in Page County, Virginia, which is in the Shenandoah Valley, and extremely Republican. And taking what the senator said and what you all are saying, do you have any advice on how to perhaps distill out of all this a message that is concise and persuasive to at least moderate, probably business-oriented Republicans? And I'm pushing off to the side the real diehard, extreme right who are not going to listen to anything, just blow them off entirely for purposes of this question, going after moderate people who are susceptible to effective arguments. Any advice?
Does anybody want? I mean, I can jump in. Do you have any thoughts on that? Okay, sure. So, I mean, I think we are. Yeah, I think that's right. And so when we look at this legislation and where it's going to go, there are a number of Republicans. I mean, I think in the House and Senate, and I think there's basically two principal concerns that I would say that they have. Number one is the middle class taxpayers that are seeing a tax increase under this bill. And there's tens of millions of them under both the House and Senate version. So I think, obviously, any member of Congress, when their constituents tell them don't raise my taxes, and don't raise my taxes to pay for a corporate tax cut, are going to be responsive to that. And so I think that's the message for Republican and Democratic members of Congress. And second, I think, the Republicans have spent a long time talking about deficit, how much they care about the deficits and the national debt. I mean, that was the driving, issue, they said, for them under President Obama. And so this bill increases the deficit by $1.5 trillion in the first 10 years and by untold trillions of dollars after that. And so I think, and you just listen to what Senator Corker and them have said, they're very concerned about the deficit. And this bill very clearly increases the deficit. They might be able to say that somehow assert that tax cuts pay for themselves, but there's no evidence ever that that's the case. So I think the ones that are sincerely concerned about the deficit are receptive to that message. Yeah.
Maybe one.
Yeah, go ahead.
One additional point that Senator Warren made was that the tax reform was supposed to lead to a simplified system, a simplified process. It is actually quite complex, even for small business owners. It's quite complex in terms of figuring out whether we can or take advantage of it or not. It'll be easy for large companies to figure that out and to take advantage of it, but not for us.
And I also, there is a whole slew of extraordinarily wealthy people in this country that understand how bad this tax bill is, right? And there's a letter, right, from 400 billionaires who say, we don't need this tax cut. This doesn't move the country forward, right? So I would probably reference that for, I presume, your wealthy associates in the Shenandoah.
Hi. I've been very taken with the fact that there are a lot of ads on TV basically supporting this bill and nothing from the opposition saying why this bill is bad. So I'm wondering where the money is, all the billionaires that have money, why aren't they doing it to basically get the message out to the ordinary person?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I mean, I'll answer quickly. I think they are. But I think there's no way that the people that there's no way that the anti-tax plan side is going to outspend the pro-tax plan side, the pro-corporate tax cut side. It's just not going to happen. So we need to, yeah, even if it's a little bit. So the things that we can do is share things on social media, because even when they make a simple ad, you can share it, and it just can, you know, it needs to be people sharing things on Twitter and Facebook, particularly Facebook. I mean, there's a video of a member of Congress, Susan Delbene from Washington, talking about the unfairnesses in the tax plan between people and corporations, and it went viral on Facebook. So we have those kinds of tools that are, you know, small d democratic for getting the message out, but we will never meet the other side in paid ads, for sure.
Which is all the more reason why we should oppose this tax bill, right? We know that the concentration of power never works out well in government, and the concentration of wealth doesn't work out well, right? And the more we concentrate wealth, it becomes its own feedback loop. And now the kind of money that is concentrated on that side in the hands of the American Legislative Exchange Council, in the hands of the Koch organization, that kind of power winds up translated into political power, and it becomes very, very difficult to break through that. So there's a deeper reason than just simple finances on this. There's a culture that we can start to inculcate by beginning with stopping this tax plan.
I'd like to just add a quick statement. I think we have a very diseased capitalistic system right now, and it's destroying our democracy and the soul of our country. And we need to find some new models that work.
So we should probably wrap up. I mean, I just want to offer, yeah, sorry, we're sort of at the end of our time. I want to offer just our panelists, first of all, thank you for being here. I mean, I think it's so totally critical that small business owners, you know, we hear the actual voices of small business owners and not the ones, like you said, whose identities are being stolen by front groups that purport to speak for small business. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll just offer you the opportunity just to say some final thoughts about this tax bill.
So, you know, it's the same trickle-down economics plan that has not worked in the past. I'm not sure why they think it'll work now. And so, you know, maybe we need to point out a little bit of history to people.
Nice. We're trying to do that.
Yeah.
We're trying to do that. That's our job at CAP. So go.
I think I said that, but I would double down on what Rashonda said. You know, in 1979, in the Republican primary, George W. Bush called this kind of tax thinking voodoo economics. And he was right then. And it still is voodoo economics. It's a sales pitch to say it's going to work for the American people. It's going to work for the upper 0.1%, and that's all.
Yep, same. I can ditto both those comments and just say that this tax bill is demonstrating once again that the majority of Americans, which includes our Main Street and our small businesses, need to sacrifice once again to help the big guys with this myth that they're going to help us and we're going to have some trickle-down economics. It ain't true. It hasn't happened. Why are we in this mess we're in if it's working? And we need to continue to fight hard to stop this tax bill. It's not the right direction for the majority of the people in this country and for small businesses.
Last round, Bev.
Sure. I was just saying, I'm going to quadruple down on the comments. Yep, sorry. Yeah. I'm going to quadruple down on the comments that have been made already, but also say again that I was looking forward to something that would in fact simplify the tax system for small businesses, that would in fact make our lives easier. And what I'm seeing is that it's more of a help to people who can hire teams of accountants and lawyers to figure out how to make themselves more wealthy. I see it increasing the income inequality, which is bad for society. I see it taking money away from the infrastructure that we need, which is what I actually need as a small business, is the infrastructure, education, technology. And that's, money's being taken away from that.
All right, well, thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you for all of you. Appreciate it.